They did not just sink Harper Reed's boat and leave her to die in the Pacific. Inside a hidden command room, men watched through encrypted satellite feeds as Harper lay unconscious on broken wreckage. An injured German shepherd named Atlas covered her body, barely moving. One man smiled. "The storm will erase everything," he said. They shut down the signal and declared the mission complete. They believed Harper was dead. They believed Atlas would freeze beside her. They believed the evidence would disappear beneath the waves. They were wrong. The secret was hidden inside Atlas's tactical collar, and the dog was still guarding it. The storm had not erased them. 42 miles west of Washington's Olympic Peninsula, the Pacific rolled beneath a Coast Guard rescue helicopter like black metal being torn apart. Waves rose beneath the aircraft, their white crests ripped sideways by the wind. Rain struck the windows hard enough to sound like gravel. Commander Daniel Cross stood behind the cockpit, one gloved hand gripping an overhead strap. Daniel was 45, tall and broad-shouldered, with short dark hair turning silver at the temples. A narrow scar crossed the bridge of his nose, and deep lines framed his gray-blue eyes. Around his crew, he was patient, direct, and difficult to provoke. His calm, however, had been built from guilt. 6 years earlier, during a winter rescue near Kodiak, Daniel had sent his closest friend, Chief Petty Officer Mark Ellis, into the water after a capsized fishing crew. A cable failure had dragged Mark beneath the wreckage before Daniel could bring him back. The investigation cleared Daniel, but he never cleared himself. Since then, he checked every strap twice and refused to call a search hopeless while even the smallest chance remained. "Signal again," said Lieutenant Maya Collins from the pilot's seat. Maya was 33, lean and athletic, with warm brown skin and tightly braided black hair hidden beneath her helmet. She was calm, precise, and known for wasting neither words nor movement during emergencies. The damaged beacon flashed across the navigation screen, then vanished. "Same coordinates?" Daniel asked. "Drifting southeast," Maya replied. "Could be wreckage. Could be someone tied to it." Behind Daniel, rescue swimmer Evan Brooks tightened his gear. Evan was 29, compact and muscular, with sandy hair and a square jaw. He usually joked during routine flights, but real danger stripped the humor from him completely. Lightning opened the sky. "There," Daniel said. A broken section of an emergency raft appeared between the waves. A woman lay motionless across it, barely above the water. Maya circled lower. The woman appeared to be in her mid-30s. Long, dark brown hair covered part of her pale face. Her charcoal survival suit was torn along one arm, and blood darkened the material near her ribs. One hand remained clenched around a black strap beside her body. Harper Reed was 36. Beneath the cold and exhaustion, she had sharp, intelligent features, high cheekbones, a straight nose, and a faint scar near her left eyebrow. She had once carried herself like someone trained to calculate every risk in a room. Now she survived one shallow breath at a time. Covering her chest was a German shepherd. Atlas was large, black and tan, with age showing in his gray muzzle. The tip of his right ear was missing. A long scar crossed his left shoulder, partly hidden beneath soaked fur, and fresh blood seeped from a wound near it. Despite his condition, he kept his body pressed over Harper like a shield. A reinforced tactical collar circled his neck. Atlas lifted his head and watched the helicopter. "That dog's military trained," Daniel said. Evan glanced at him. "How can you tell?" "His position. He's protecting her airway and body heat. He isn't there by accident." The raft tilted. Harper's arm slid toward the water. Atlas caught her sleeve gently between his teeth and pulled it back. Evan clipped into the hoist line. "I'm going down," Daniel caught his shoulder. Approach slowly. Don't touch the collar. Why? Because he's guarding it. Evan dropped into the storm. The Pacific swallowed him for a moment before he surfaced and fought toward the raft. Atlas struggled upright. His rear legs trembled, but he placed himself between Evan and Harper. Easy, boy, Evan called. Atlas growled. It was not a frightened animal's warning. It was low, measured, and controlled. Daniel used the helicopter's external speaker. Atlas, he said, reading the metal nameplate beneath the collar. Stay! The dog froze. Daniel repeated the command in the calm tone once used by military handlers. Stay! Atlas looked toward the aircraft as if judging everyone inside it. Then he lowered his head slightly, though he did not move away from Harper. Evan reached the raft and pressed 2 fingers against her neck. I have a pulse, he shouted. Very weak. He tried to slide a sling under Harper's shoulders. Atlas snapped at his glove and stopped less than an inch from his wrist. A warning, not an attack. He won't let me separate them, Evan said. Then bring them up together, Daniel replied. The collar could catch. Work around it. Do not remove it. Another wave struck the raft. Water washed over Harper's face. Atlas shifted across her and absorbed the impact with his injured shoulder. Evan widened the rescue sling around both of them. Atlas watched every movement, but allowed it once he understood Harper would remain against him. The hoist lifted them from the sea. Halfway to the helicopter, Harper opened her eyes. They were green, unfocused, and filled with pain. Her lips moved, but the wind swallowed the sound. Evan leaned closer. What did you say? Harper's fingers closed around Atlas's tactical collar. Don't let them take it, she whispered. Take what? The collar. Her eyes closed again. Daniel helped pull them into the helicopter. Atlas collapsed beside Harper, then dragged himself close enough to place one paw over her shoulder. A young medic reached toward the collar. Atlas's head snapped up. Daniel blocked the medic's hand. Leave it on. Sir, I need to check beneath it. You can treat him without removing it. The medic hesitated, then nodded. Maya turned the helicopter toward Port Angeles. Evan wrapped Harper in thermal blankets while Atlas refused to leave her side. Blood spread through the fur on his shoulder, but his eyes followed every hand that came near the collar. Daniel knelt beside them. He had seen dogs protect wounded handlers before, but Atlas was protecting more than Harper. The dog was guarding a mission she had nearly died to complete. Far inland, inside a windowless operations center, a red indicator appeared on a surveillance screen. A technician leaned forward. He was young, pale, and nervous, with thin glasses and hands that moved quickly over the keyboard. Her biometric signal is active, he said. The well-dressed man standing behind him stopped smiling. And the dog? Still with her. The room fell silent. The man reached for a secure phone. Activate the recovery team, he ordered. They survived. The helicopter reached the abandoned Coast Guard station outside Port Angeles just before dawn. The facility stood on a rocky bluff above the Strait of Juan de Fuca, its weather-stained buildings surrounded by bent pines and rusted fencing. It had once served as a coastal rescue outpost, but budget cuts had reduced it to an emergency medical site used only when storms overwhelmed the larger bases. That isolation made it imperfect for treatment, but useful for keeping Harper Reed out of official sight. Daniel Cross stepped onto the landing pad as medics carried Harper toward the main building. Atlas was placed on a reinforced stretcher beside her, though the German Shepherd repeatedly tried to rise whenever the distance between them widened. His legs shook beneath him, and blood had dried in dark lines across his left shoulder. Even so, his eyes remained fixed on Harper, and the tactical collar around his neck remained untouched. Dr. Megan Foster met them inside the station's small treatment wing. Megan was 38, medium height, and strong through the shoulders from years of handling frightened working animals. She had pale, freckled skin, hazel eyes, and copper-brown hair tied into a practical knot. Her voice was gentle with animals and sharply direct with people, especially those who ignored medical instructions. 4 years earlier, Megan had lost a search and rescue dog named Boone during a landslide near Mount Baker. Boone had located 2 trapped hikers before the ground collapsed beneath him. Megan had spent 17 hours helping recovery teams search for his body. Since then, she treated every injured working dog as if someone's life still depended on it. "What happened to him?" she asked as Atlas was carried inside. "Exposure, possible impact injury, cut shoulder," Daniel said. "And he won't allow anyone to remove the collar." Megan looked at Atlas's rigid body and the warning in his eyes. "Then no one removes it." She lowered herself beside the stretcher without reaching for him. Atlas watched her carefully. Megan let him smell the back of her hand, then placed a bowl of warm water near his muzzle. He ignored it and looked toward the room where Harper was being treated. "She stays where he can see her," Megan said. The medical staff moved the 2 stretchers into the same treatment room. Harper was connected to warmed intravenous fluids and covered with thermal blankets. Her breathing remained shallow but regular. Atlas finally drank after Megan positioned him beside the bed. She examined him slowly, beginning with his paws and working upward without touching the collar. His body told a longer story than the fresh wound. Old scar tissue crossed his ribs. One rear knee had been surgically repaired. 2 teeth were worn down more than normal, likely from repeated work involving restraints or reinforced materials. Beneath the fur around his neck, Megan found pressure marks from years of wearing tactical equipment. "He's been deployed," she said quietly. "More than once." Daniel studied the missing tip of Atlas's ear and the long scar over his shoulder. "Military?" "Military, federal security, private contractor, something organized. He's trained to tolerate pain, guard equipment, and remain beside one person under extreme stress." Megan cleaned the fresh wound while Atlas stared at Harper. "He's dehydrated, hypothermic, and exhausted enough that he should not be conscious. But he's keeping himself awake because he thinks the mission is still active." Daniel looked at the collar. "Maybe it is." A few minutes later, Ethan Cole arrived, carrying 2 hard equipment cases. Ethan was 34, tall and thin, with unruly black hair, narrow brown eyes, and a permanent shadow of stubble along his jaw. He wore an old gray sweater beneath a station technician's vest, and moved with the distracted energy of a man whose mind reached conclusions before his body caught up. Ethan had once worked in naval communications security, but left after reporting a flaw his supervisors preferred to hide. He had little patience for authority, polished explanations, or devices that behaved too intelligently. Daniel pointed toward Atlas. "I need to know what's inside that collar without opening it." Ethan set his cases on a steel table. "That depends on whether the person who built it wanted us to know." He assembled a passive scanner powered by an isolated battery. No wireless connection was enabled. Megan remained beside Atlas, one hand resting near his shoulder without restraining him. Ethan moved the scanning plate several inches above the tactical collar. Atlas growled. Ethan stopped immediately. "He has excellent opinions about technical inspections." "Stay to the left," Daniel said. He reacted when the medic approached from the right. Ethan shifted positions. Atlas followed him with his eyes, but allowed the scan to continue. Lines of signal data began appearing on the screen. Ethan's expression changed from curiosity to concern. "There's a storage unit inside," he said. "Encrypted solid-state memory. Dense architecture, probably custom-built." "How much data?" Daniel asked. "Enough for documents, images, communications logs, maybe operational records." Ethan enlarged another section of the scan. "But that's not the worst part." He pointed to a circuit surrounding the memory core. It appeared as a thin web of conductive material linked to pressure sensors inside the collar. "This is a tamper system. Cut the wrong strap, remove the casing incorrectly, or enter an invalid access sequence, and the storage wipes itself." Megan frowned. "Could it hurt Atlas?" "Possibly not by design, but the erasure circuit could overheat. There's also a transmitter buried beneath the memory layer." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "A tracker?" "More dangerous. It looks inactive until the tamper circuit is triggered. Then it sends a short, encrypted burst. Whoever receives it would know the device had been found, and probably where it was opened." A quiet movement came from the bed. Harper's eyes opened. She did not wake like an ordinary patient. Her body remained weak, but her gaze sharpened instantly, moving from Daniel to Megan, then Ethan and the scanner beside Atlas. Panic crossed her face. "Stop," she whispered. Ethan lifted both hands away from the equipment. "Passive scan only." Harper tried to sit up. Pain forced her back against the pillow. "If you open it wrong, everything disappears." Daniel stepped closer. "We know about the erasure circuit." Her eyes locked onto his. "Then you know only the first danger. The signal does not just report the device. It reports everyone near it." "Who receives it?" Harper's fingers reached toward Atlas. The dog pushed his muzzle beneath her hand. "The people who sank my boat." Daniel asked the question carefully. "Who are they?" Harper looked toward the ceiling camera in the corner of the room. "How many systems is this station connected to?" "Medical, security, communications," Daniel said. "Then they may already know I'm here." Daniel turned toward the door. Until that moment, he had delayed entering Harper's identity into the official Coast Guard reporting network. He had told the operations center that the survivors remained unidentified because of medical instability. It had bought them time, but not much. "I haven't filed your name," he said. Harper studied him with the suspicion of someone for whom trust had repeatedly become a weapon. "Why?" "Because someone tried to kill you with enough resources to watch the result through satellites. People like that do not operate without access." For the first time, Harper's expression softened slightly. "You were right to wait." A knock sounded from the corridor. A maintenance worker entered before anyone answered. He appeared to be in his early 40s, average height, with neatly cut blonde hair and a clean-shaven face. His gray coveralls looked new, and his smile was polite without warmth. He carried a metal toolbox and wore an identification badge marked with the station's insignia. "Routine ventilation inspection," he said. Daniel glanced at the duty board beside the door. No maintenance personnel were scheduled. Atlas saw the badge. The German shepherd surged upright with a violent growl, tearing the fluid line from his front leg. Megan caught the stand before it fell. Atlas ignored the man's face and stared at a small blue symbol printed beneath the photograph on his badge. A four-pointed star enclosed by a broken circle. The worker stepped back. His hand tightened around the toolbox. Daniel moved between him and the treatment room. "Name?" "Paul Mercer." "You're not on the duty list." "Emergency dispatch. Headquarters request. Which headquarters? The man hesitated for less than a second, but Daniel saw it. Atlas lunged again. Paul Mercer backed into the corridor. I'll verify the order. He turned and walked away with controlled speed. Daniel waited until the outer door closed, then looked at Ethan. Can you check that badge symbol? Not through the network, Ethan said. Not if we think someone is watching. Daniel faced Megan. Keep Atlas and Harper together. No one enters without my approval. Megan nodded and began reconnecting Atlas's line. He recognized that symbol. Harper's face had gone pale for a reason unrelated to the cold. Yes, she said. Atlas remembers it. Daniel looked toward the empty corridor. From where? Harper tightened her hand in the dog's fur. From the people who trained us. Outside, wind pushed rain against the station windows. Inside, Daniel took the unsigned incident report from his jacket, folded it once, and locked it inside a drawer instead of transmitting it. Whatever had followed Harper from the Pacific had already reached the station. Until he knew which systems and which officers could be trusted, the official chain of command would remain silent. And the secret inside Atlas's collar would remain closed. 3 months after Ryan Monroe disappeared, his old wristwatch was still sitting on the right corner of Rachel Monroe's desk in Seattle. The watch had a scratched steel face, a faded brown leather strap, and a second hand that stopped at 2:43 on the morning Ryan vanished. Rachel had replaced the battery twice, but it never moved again. She kept it beside her laptop anyway, not because she believed it would suddenly start working, but because removing it would feel too much like admitting her brother was dead. Rachel was 34, tall and slender, with shoulder-length auburn hair, pale green eyes, and a narrow face that looked sharper when she had not slept. She dressed in dark trousers, practical boots, and wool coats with too many pockets because reporters always needed somewhere to hide a recorder, spare batteries, and information no one else was supposed to possess. She was intelligent, relentless, and difficult to intimidate. But grief had made her impatient. Before Ryan disappeared, Rachel had been known for spending weeks verifying every claim. Now she chased rumors through the night, afraid that caution might cost her the final trace of him. Ryan Monroe had been 39 when he vanished. He was 6 feet tall, lean rather than muscular, with dark blonde hair that refused to stay combed and blue eyes that always seemed amused by complicated machines. As a maritime systems engineer, he could understand the internal design of a ship after studying its schematics for only a few minutes. He was patient with broken equipment, awkward with strangers, and fiercely protective of Rachel, especially after their parents died in a highway accident when she was 20. Ryan had helped pay for her journalism degree and called every Sunday, even when his work took him offshore for weeks. Then, 3 months earlier, the calls stopped. 2 days before he disappeared, Ryan had arrived at Rachel's apartment, soaked by Seattle rain and carrying no coat, despite the February cold. He had locked the door behind him, pulled the curtains, and placed his phone inside her microwave before speaking. He told her that North Star Dynamics, a powerful defense contractor headquartered outside Tacoma, had been installing experimental weapons control systems aboard civilian research and cargo vessels. Officially, the equipment was designed for maritime navigation and piracy prevention. Ryan had discovered hidden targeting software, remote override protocols, and modifications allowing someone on shore to seize control of a ship without its crew knowing. When Rachel asked whether he had proof, he said he was working with someone inside the organization. He refused to give her the person's name. He only said, "If anything happens to me, don't believe the first explanation they give you." The first explanation arrived 48 hours later. North Star claimed Ryan had resigned unexpectedly and probably left the country. Seattle police found his abandoned truck near a marina south of the city. His wallet and keys were inside. There was no blood, no body, and no useful security footage. A detective suggested Ryan might have suffered a breakdown. Rachel knew her brother had been frightened, but he had not been confused. Someone had made him disappear, and someone powerful had worked quickly to make the disappearance look voluntary. Rachel worked for the Seattle Sentinel, an independent newspaper struggling to survive falling subscriptions and expensive lawsuits. Her editor, Martin Hale, summoned her into his office shortly after 9 that morning. Martin was 57, heavy-set, with thinning gray hair, tired brown eyes, and shirt sleeves permanently rolled to his elbows. He had once been a fearless political reporter, but 20 years of budget cuts had turned courage into something he measured against legal costs. He cared about Rachel like a daughter, which made his fear sound more like anger. "Close the door," he said. Rachel remained standing. "That usually means you have bad news." "North Star's attorneys contacted us again." "They always contact us after I ask useful questions." "This time they sent 43 pages. Martin pushed a thick legal letter across the desk. Defamation, interference with contracts, unlawful acquisition of proprietary information. They are threatening the paper, the publisher, and you personally." "They cannot sue me for investigating my brother's disappearance." "They can sue long enough to bankrupt everyone in this building." Rachel looked through the glass wall toward the newsroom. Fewer than 30 people worked there now. Half the desks had been empty since the latest round of layoffs. Martin lowered his voice. "I am not telling you Ryan does not matter. I am telling you that you cannot use this newspaper to continue the investigation." "So you want me to stop?" "I want you to stay alive long enough to hate me for this." Rachel took the legal letter, but said nothing. Martin's expression softened. "Go home. Sleep. Let the police handle it." "The police stopped returning my calls 6 weeks ago." "Then find another way, Rachel." "Just not through the Sentinel." She left his office carrying the letter and the familiar anger of someone being told that power had made the truth too expensive. When she returned to her desk, her computer screen was black. A single notification waited on her private phone, sent through an encrypted messaging application she had not opened in months. The sender had no name. The message contained one photograph. It showed an elderly German shepherd lying beside an unconscious woman inside what appeared to be a medical room. The dog had a damaged right ear, a scar over his left shoulder, and a heavy tactical collar around his neck. Rachel enlarged the image. Behind the dog, part of a Coast Guard medical cabinet was visible. A timestamp in the corner showed the photograph had been taken less than 2 hours earlier. Beneath it were 6 words. "The dog still carries the key." Rachel read the sentence 3 times. Then she noticed a series of numbers hidden in the image file's metadata. They were not random. Ryan had taught her years ago to recognize his identification codes. 4 digits from the registration number of their father's fishing boat, followed by Rachel's birthday written backward. The code appeared at the end of the file. Ryan had marked the device. Either he was alive or someone had found something he created before disappearing. Rachel copied the image to an offline drive, wiped the message from her phone, and left the newsroom through the rear exit. She did not see the black SUV until she reached Pioneer Square. It remained 2 vehicles behind her through 3 turns. Its windows were dark, and its front license plate was obscured by road grime. Rachel changed lanes abruptly. The SUV followed. She entered an underground parking garage, drove down 1 level, then exited through a second ramp onto another street. The vehicle appeared again less than a minute later. Someone knew she had received the photograph. At the old Coast Guard station near Port Angeles, Harper Reed lay awake beneath thermal blankets, while Daniel Cross stood beside the treatment room window. Atlas rested near the bed, but his eyes remained fixed on the corridor. Ethan Cole had disconnected every unnecessary network cable in the room, while Megan Foster continued treating the dog's damaged shoulder. Daniel placed a printed copy of the strange maintenance badge symbol on the bedside table. "You said the people who trained you used this mark." Harper nodded weakly. "It belongs to North Star Dynamics, not the public company, the division hidden behind it." "Was the device in Atlas's collar built by them?" "Partly." "Who built the rest?" Harper looked down at the German Shepherd. "A maritime engineer named Ryan Monroe." Daniel recognized the name from regional missing person reports. "The man who disappeared in Seattle?" "He helped me copy North Star's files. He modified the storage system so they could not erase it remotely, then installed a separate identification code inside the memory structure." "Why?" "So someone he trusted would know the evidence was real." "Who did he trust?" Harper's eyes moved toward the rain-covered window. "His sister." More than 80 miles away, Rachel watched the black SUV in her rearview mirror and tightened her hand around Ryan's silent wristwatch. She no longer believed the photograph had been sent only to give her hope. It was an invitation, a warning, and a trail leading west toward the coast. For the first time in 3 months, Rachel had proof that Ryan's disappearance and North Star Dynamics were connected. She also had proof that whoever had taken him was now following her. Daniel Cross remained beside Harper's bed after she revealed Ryan Monroe's connection to the device hidden inside Atlas's collar. Rain pressed against the windows of the old Coast Guard station, and the building creaked under the wind coming off the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Ethan Cole stayed near the isolated scanner, recording nothing on the station network, while Megan Foster replaced the fluid line Atlas had torn free. The German Shepherd lay against Harper's bed with his injured shoulder bandaged, but he did not sleep. His eyes followed Daniel as the commander placed the copied North Star symbol on the table. "You said they trained both of you," Daniel said. Harper rested one hand against Atlas's gray muzzle. For several seconds, she seemed to be deciding how much of her past the room could safely hold. "North Star did not find me in the military," she finally said. "They found me before I understood what they were building." Harper had grown up near Colorado Springs in a narrow military house where uniforms hung beside the front door and every clock was set 5 minutes fast. Her father, Colonel Samuel Reed, had been a tall, disciplined Army officer with iron-gray hair, a square jaw, and a voice that rarely rose because people listened the first time. At home, however, Samuel was gentler than his soldiers would have believed. He taught Harper to calculate distance using fence posts, estimate approaching storms from cloud movement, and treat mathematics as a language the world could not lie in. Harper's mother had died from cancer when Harper was 9, leaving Samuel to raise an intensely observant daughter who preferred equations to conversation. By 16, Harper could solve advanced trajectory problems, build small guidance systems from discarded electronics, and predict the movement of objects under changing wind conditions faster than most university students. Samuel never treated her intelligence as strange. He called it a responsibility. When Harper was 19, Samuel died during what the Army described as a training helicopter malfunction. The official report was brief, polished, and final. Harper received condolences, folded flags, and explanations that answered nothing. She lost her father, her financial support, and the one person who had taught her that knowledge should protect people. North Star Dynamics approached her 6 months later. Their recruiter was Dr. Victor Shaw, a 51-year-old systems director with silver hair, expensive glasses, and the controlled warmth of a man who could make recruitment sound like rescue. Shaw told Harper that her father had respected North Star's work. He offered her a scholarship, a salary, and a position designing remote guidance systems for national defense. Harper was grieving, proud, and desperate to believe Samuel's death could still lead her toward meaningful service. She accepted. North Star's Colorado facility looked like a university laboratory surrounded by mountains. Harper worked with mathematicians, engineers, former intelligence officers, and military contractors. Her early assignments involved tracking illegal weapons shipments, improving drone navigation during signal disruption, and developing remote control systems that could guide unmanned rescue craft through dangerous waters. Every project arrived with a classified briefing explaining that lives depended on precision. Harper believed it. She wanted to believe it. Her calculations helped locate a hostage convoy in Syria and redirected a surveillance drone away from a school during a strike operation. Those successes became the moral currency North Star used to purchase her obedience. The changes came gradually. Target files began containing fewer names and more codes. Missions, once described as surveillance, became permanent risk resolution. Journalists investigating defense contracts appeared in threat assessments. Government auditors were labeled compromised assets. A state official preparing to testify about procurement fraud died when his autonomous vehicle accelerated through a mountain barrier. North Star called it an unfortunate systems interaction. Harper recognized fragments of her own control architecture in the crash report. When she questioned Shaw, he told her that national security required decisions ordinary courts were too slow to make. "You see equations," he said. "We see consequences." Harper continued working, partly because she feared what North Star would do if she stopped, and partly because admitting the truth would force her to accept how many deaths her work had already made possible. Atlas entered her life during that period. He was 7 years old then, powerful and alert, with a black and tan coat, one damaged ear, and a long scar across his left shoulder from an earlier deployment overseas. His assigned handler was Grant Voss, a broad, cold-eyed former military contractor who treated animals as equipment and employees as replaceable parts. Voss explained that Atlas would accompany Harper during travel, secure sensitive technology, and detect unauthorized access. What he did not say was that the dog had also been trained to monitor her movements and prevent her from leaving controlled areas with classified materials. Atlas slept outside Harper's quarters, followed her through laboratories, and positioned himself between her and every unlocked exit. At first, Harper resented him because she understood what he represented. But Atlas never looked at her the way North Star's people did. He did not measure usefulness. He responded to fear, pain, and honesty. The first time Atlas openly chose Harper occurred during a staged accident in Nevada. Harper had discovered that a targeting system she designed had been used to identify a federal investigator who later disappeared. She copied part of the mission log onto a hidden drive and planned to question Shaw. That night, Atlas woke her by pressing his muzzle against her face and pulling the blanket from the bed. He ignored her command to lie down and began scratching at the apartment door. Harper smelled nothing and heard nothing, but Atlas refused to stop. She followed him outside through a rear service stairwell. Less than 2 minutes later, a gas explosion destroyed the kitchen and bedroom. Investigators later blamed a faulty line. Harper knew the building used electric appliances. Atlas had detected the chemical accelerant before it ignited. After that night, he stopped sleeping outside her door and began sleeping against it from the inside. When Voss ordered him away from Harper during inspections, Atlas obeyed slowly and returned the moment the handler turned his back. During one interrogation disguised as a security interview, Atlas placed himself between Harper and two armed men. He did not attack. He simply made it clear that reaching her would require passing through him. North Star had assigned the dog to guard an asset. Atlas had decided the asset was a person. Harper's guilt grew heavier with each file she secretly reviewed. She found the names of whistleblowers, reporters, engineers, and public officials whose deaths had been disguised as accidents, suicides, equipment failures, or disappearances. Some operations had used technologies she helped create. She began collecting evidence, but lacked a way to remove it from North Star's protected systems. That was when Ryan Monroe contacted her. Ryan was working under contract on civilian ships carrying North Star navigation hardware. He had discovered hidden remote control functions embedded inside the systems and traced several maritime disasters to unauthorized commands sent from shore. Unlike Harper, Ryan had not been shaped by years of classified justifications. He saw the evidence and immediately called it murder. Harper initially told him exposing North Star would only get them killed. Ryan answered that silence was already killing people. He showed her a list of living witnesses marked for future removal. Engineers, auditors, a prosecutor, and 2 reporters. "You cannot undo the people who died," he told her. "But you can decide whether the next names become graves." Ryan helped her copy the data into a protected storage core. He created a private identification sequence so Rachel could authenticate it if he vanished. Atlas carried the physical key because Ryan believed North Star would search every device Harper owned, but might underestimate an old dog. Daniel listened without interrupting until Harper mentioned a maritime operation near Kodiak 6 years earlier. Ethan opened the relevant outer metadata using only the passive scan. The file contained no full mission details, but the date, location, and operation code were visible. Daniel's face changed. It matched the night Chief Petty Officer Mark Ellis died during the fishing boat rescue. The record referenced a remote ballast override aboard the vessel, an engineered communications blackout, and a secondary instruction to delay rescue response. Mark had not died because the sea had been stronger than the crew. He had entered a disaster North Star may have deliberately created. Daniel stared at the screen, his expression controlled but no longer calm. For 6 years, he had blamed himself for sending Mark into the water. Now the guilt had somewhere else to turn. Harper watched him recognize the shape of his own loss inside hers. "I do not know whether my system caused the override," she said, "but North Star used architecture my team developed." Daniel closed the file. "Then we find out who gave the order." Atlas lifted his head at the change in Daniel's voice. The commander looked at the old German shepherd, then at Harper. He no longer saw only a survivor carrying dangerous evidence. He saw a woman who had helped build a weapon, realized what it had become, and chosen to turn against it before more names were added to the dead. Outside, the storm continued moving east. Inside the station, Daniel finally understood that Harper's secret was connected not only to Ryan Monroe's disappearance, but also to the loss that had shaped his own life. Daniel Cross had spent 6 years believing the Pacific had killed Mark Ellis. Now he knew someone might have built the disaster that took him. The realization had not made him reckless. It had made him colder. He ordered Ethan Cole to keep the Kodiak file isolated, instructed Megan Foster not to let Harper or Atlas out of her sight, and began checking the old Coast Guard station room by room without alerting the regional command center. If North Star had delayed a rescue operation 6 years earlier, Daniel could no longer assume that a uniform, badge, or official instruction meant safety. Atlas found the first proof before any human did. The German shepherd had been resting beside Harper's bed when his head suddenly lifted toward the ventilation grill above the medical cabinets. His nostrils moved slowly. Then he stood, despite Megan's warning, and crossed the room with his injured shoulder held stiff. He did not bark. He placed one paw against the wall beneath the grill and stared upward. "What do you hear?" Megan asked. Atlas scratched once at the metal cover, then looked toward Ethan. Megan studied the dog's posture. "He isn't reacting to a person." Ethan brought over a portable frequency detector. "Electronic?" "Possibly, or chemical." Megan touched the scar along Atlas's shoulder. "Dogs trained for tactical recovery are sometimes conditioned to recognize explosives, tracking compounds, fuel accelerants, and overheated circuitry." His teeth and paw damage suggested detection work, but I didn't realize how broad his training was. Daniel removed the ventilation cover carefully. A small black sensor had been attached behind the duct lining. It was no larger than a coin, with a narrow microphone membrane and a low-power transmitter designed to wake only when nearby voices crossed a certain volume. Ethan's face tightened. "This isn't commercial surveillance equipment." "North Star?" Daniel asked. "More specific." Ethan turned the device under a magnifying light. Etched into the casing was the same broken circle symbol Atlas had recognized on the fake maintenance badge. Beneath it were two tiny letters, B.H. Black Harbor. Harper's expression changed. "Recovery Division." Daniel looked at her. "What do they recover?" "Evidence, equipment, people who know too much." "And when recovery is impossible?" "They erase the problem." Ethan examined the transmitter. It was installed recently. Whoever placed it wanted to know whether Harper had spoken, whether we had opened the collar, and how many people were in this room. Daniel thought of the clean-shaven maintenance worker calling himself Paul Mercer. The man had not been inspecting the station. He had been mapping resistance. Before Daniel could respond, a sharp alarm sounded through the building. Red lights began flashing above the treatment room door. A recorded voice announced a hazardous gas leak in the medical wing and ordered immediate evacuation. Megan checked the wall monitor. "I don't smell anything." "You wouldn't necessarily," Ethan said. "Some gases are odorless." Atlas did not move toward the exit. Instead, he turned his head toward the air vent and growled. Harper forced herself higher against the pillows. "It's false." Daniel looked at the emergency panel. "How do you know?" "Black Harbor does not attack a protected room first. They make everyone leave it." A young Coast Guard seaman appeared in the doorway, wearing a respirator around his neck. His name was Caleb Dunn, 22 years old, tall and narrow-shouldered, with close-cut brown hair, an open face, and the anxious posture of a man still trying to look older than his rank. Caleb had joined the Coast Guard after his older cousin drowned during a river flood in Oregon. He followed rules because he believed rules kept frightened people alive. Until that morning, he had never considered that an official order might be designed to deliver someone into danger. "Commander, Regional Control says evacuate everyone to the Eastern Vehicle Yard," Caleb reported. "Medical transport is coming for the patient." "Who authorized the transport?" Daniel asked. "Sector Command." "Name?" Caleb hesitated and checked the message on his handheld terminal. "Captain Wallace." Daniel knew Captain Wallace was attending a maritime conference in San Diego. "That order is false." Caleb's eyes widened. "Sir, it came through the official system." "That means the system is compromised." Another message appeared on Caleb's screen, ordering him to remove Harper immediately and secure the dogs separately, because of an alleged contamination risk. Caleb read it twice. His training told him to obey the chain of command. Daniel's expression told him that obedience might kill the people inside the room. "What do you need me to do?" Caleb asked. Daniel saw the decision settle behind the young man's fear. "Lock the western corridor. Tell anyone who asks that the patient became unstable during evacuation. Do not mention Harper, Atlas, or the collar." Caleb swallowed. "That could end my career." "It might." Caleb looked at Atlas, who stood between Harper and the door despite his bandaged shoulder. "Then I'd better make it worth ending." He left and sealed the corridor. Ethan accessed the station's environmental controls through a disconnected maintenance panel. The gas sensors showed a dangerous leak in 3 rooms, but the raw intake data remained normal. Someone had injected false readings into the alarm system. At the same time, security cameras began freezing one by one. "They're blinding the building," Ethan said. Daniel moved Harper's bed away from the windows. "Their target is the collar." Harper shook her head. "First Atlas, then the collar. They know he will not surrender it while he can fight." Megan placed herself beside the German shepherd. "Then they will have to deal with both of us." More than 80 miles away, Rachel Monroe abandoned her car inside a crowded Seattle ferry terminal after the black SUV followed her through downtown. She entered through one pedestrian gate, changed coats in a restroom, tied her auburn hair beneath a wool cap, and exited with a family boarding another route. Rachel had spent years teaching nervous sources how to recognize surveillance. She had never expected to use those lessons while carrying her brother's silent wristwatch in one pocket and North Star's legal threats in the other. She reached a rented vehicle parked near a public library and opened the offline drive containing Ryan's old files. Most were technical diagrams and encrypted shipping records she had never fully understood. One audio file had been hidden inside a folder labeled "Engine Noise Tests." Its creation date was 6 weeks after Ryan officially disappeared. Rachel pressed play. Static filled the speakers. Then, Ryan's voice emerged, weak but unmistakable. "Rachel, if you find this, they moved me north. I don't know the location. I can hear ship generators and foghorns at night. Harper has the evidence. The dog has the access key. Do not trust North Star's public offices. Do not trust anyone who contacts you through official channels." A metallic door slammed in the recording. Ryan lowered his voice. "I'm still alive." The file ended. Rachel sat motionless, both hands around the old watch. For 3 months, grief had been the only answer she possessed. Now hope arrived, carrying a different kind of pain. If Ryan had been alive 6 weeks earlier, North Star might still be holding him. She copied the recording, technical diagrams, and shipping documents onto 2 separate drives. One went inside her boot. The other she hid beneath the lining of her bag. Then she drove west toward Port Angeles, taking secondary roads and checking every mirror. At the station, the false gas alarm stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The silence that followed felt more dangerous than the sirens. Ethan found a new file on an isolated terminal that should not have been able to receive outside messages. The screen displayed the Black Harbor symbol above a line of white text. Daniel read it aloud. "Deliver Harper Reed, the German shepherd, and all recovered equipment to the Eastern Vehicle Yard before midnight. Refusal will result in loss of personnel and facility containment." A timer appeared beneath the message. 6 hours remained. Harper looked at Atlas. The dog leaned against her hand, exhausted but watchful. Daniel folded his arms and stared at the ultimatum. Black Harbor was already inside the station's systems, possibly inside the building itself. Rachel Monroe was driving toward them with evidence that her brother might still be alive. And somewhere beyond the locked corridor, men wearing legitimate badges were preparing to turn an evacuation order into an execution. Daniel looked at Caleb, Ethan, and Megan. "No one goes to the eastern yard," he said, "and no one gives them the dog." Daniel Cross did not wait for Black Harbor's countdown to reach its final hour. The old Coast Guard station was already compromised through its cameras, environmental controls, communication systems, and possibly its personnel records. Remaining there would allow the enemy to close every exit while pretending to follow official procedure. He ordered Caleb Dunn to stay behind, maintain the illusion that Harper remained inside the medical wing, and delay anyone requesting access. Caleb accepted without argument, though his pale face showed that he understood the danger. Ethan Cole created false medical monitoring signals, while Megan Foster prepared Harper and Atlas for transport. Rachel Monroe reached the station shortly after sunset in a rented sedan streaked with rain and road grime. She entered through a rear service gate after Daniel verified Ryan's identification code on the files she carried. Rachel looked exhausted, her auburn hair damp beneath a dark wool cap, but the moment Harper mentioned Ryan's name, grief sharpened into determination. She played the hidden recording in which her brother said he was still alive. Harper listened twice, recognizing the machinery behind his voice as marine turbine generators used on modified offshore platforms. "North Star kept him because they still need him," she said. "That means we may still have time." Daniel moved the group through an abandoned maintenance road running west from Port Angeles. They traveled in an unmarked utility vehicle with its official transmitter removed, following narrow forest roads beneath towering cedar and spruce trees. Rain swept across the windshield, and the Olympic Peninsula seemed to close around them in layers of darkness. Their destination was Cape Flattery, where a Cold War communication bunker had been built beneath an old lighthouse to monitor Pacific naval traffic. The structure had been abandoned after newer satellite systems replaced it. Daniel knew of the bunker because Mark Ellis had once shown him the entrance during a coastal training exercise. Mark had joked that it was the perfect place to survive the end of the world, provided no one objected to rust, rats, or military coffee from 1978. Remembering his friend's voice hurt, but it also gave Daniel a route Black Harbor might not know existed. The lighthouse rose above the cliffs like a pale, weather-beaten sentinel. Waves struck the rocks far below, sending mist into the wind. A rusted steel door, hidden behind an overgrown equipment shed, opened onto a concrete stairway descending beneath the headland. Ethan used a mechanical override rather than the electronic lock, and Daniel closed the entrance behind them with an internal wheel. The bunker consisted of a narrow central chamber, 2 equipment rooms, a generator bay, and an emergency passage leading toward a rocky service cove. Its walls were thick reinforced concrete, lined with copper mesh designed to block hostile signals. Old analog radios stood beneath canvas covers. Dust coated the floor, and the air smelled of salt, machine oil, and damp stone. Megan placed Harper on a folding cot and examined her before allowing the work to continue. Harper's core temperature had improved, but her pulse remained weak, and her injured ribs made every deep breath painful. Atlas settled beside her, his bandaged shoulder pressed against her leg. The German shepherd had barely slept since the rescue, yet he continued studying every corner of the bunker as if he had been assigned to secure it. Megan checked his gums, hydration, and wound dressing. "He needs 12 hours of uninterrupted rest," she said. Ethan glanced at Atlas, who was already staring toward the far wall. "You may need to explain the concept of uninterrupted to him." Ethan uncovered an emergency satellite terminal stored in a sealed metal cabinet. The equipment was nearly 30 years old, with a folding dish, manual alignment controls, and no automatic connection to modern networks. He replaced 2 corroded cables, connected a battery pack, and began building an independent transmission route through a dormant rescue satellite. "It will be slow," he said. "Slow is acceptable. Invisible is better." Rachel placed Ryan's copied documents beside him. They included shipping manifests, diagrams of remote vessel control systems, and lists of civilian ships that had carried North Star hardware. Harper recognized several internal project codes, but the full evidence remained locked inside Atlas's collar. Daniel's secure radio activated before Ethan completed the connection. Only one person possessed the emergency frequency: Rear Admiral Laura Bennett, Daniel's regional superior. Bennett was 54, tall and angular, with short silver blonde hair and a composed face that revealed little even under pressure. She had earned a reputation for disciplined command after coordinating hurricane rescues along the Gulf Coast. But years of political responsibility had made her cautious about actions that could damage the institution she served. She respected Daniel's judgment, though she disliked decisions made outside the chain of command. "Commander Cross," Bennett said, "you are holding an unidentified civilian connected to stolen defense materials. Washington has issued a transfer order. Bring the woman and recovered equipment to Joint Base Lewis McChord immediately." "Who signed the order?" Daniel asked. "The authorization came through the Department of Defense Liaison Office." "That does not answer my question." A pause followed. "This is not a debate." Daniel looked at Harper, Atlas, and Rachel. The station's systems were breached. Someone issued false medical and evacuation orders using official channels. "Until the source is identified, I will not transfer the survivors." Bennett's voice hardened. "You are refusing a lawful order." "I am delaying compliance because the order may deliver witnesses to the people who tried to kill them." "You have no verified evidence of that." "We are about to obtain it." Bennett gave him 30 minutes to report his location and prepare Harper for transfer. Daniel ended the call without revealing the bunker. The silence afterward felt heavier than the concrete above them. Rachel asked whether Bennett could be trusted. Daniel answered honestly. "I trust that she believes she is protecting the service. I do not know who is controlling the information she receives." Ethan finished aligning the satellite terminal while Harper prepared to open the first layer of the collar. The access procedure required her voice, a pressure sequence along the collar's reinforced seam, and Ryan's identification code.
Megan knelt beside Atlas and kept one hand against his chest. Harper whispered to him, and the dog allowed Ethan to slide a passive contact strip beneath the collar without removing it. A green indicator appeared on Ethan's isolated laptop. The first data partition opened. Files filled the screen in carefully organized groups: unauthorized maritime operations, remote navigation overrides, false accident reports, private security payments, offshore accounts, and procurement contracts routed through shell companies. Several records contained the names of Coast Guard, Navy, intelligence, and congressional officials who had accepted money, favors, or future employment from North Star Dynamics. Rachel found journalists placed under surveillance and public investigators labeled as operational risks. Daniel found Mark Ellis's rescue mission listed beside a payment authorization issued 3 days before the fishing vessel lost control. The evidence did not yet identify the person who ordered the operation, but it proved the disaster had been engineered. Before anyone could continue, Atlas rose and moved toward a section of wall behind an old communications cabinet. His nose worked along the concrete seam. He scratched once, then backed away and growled.
Ethan removed the cabinet's lower panel and found a compact device embedded behind the insulation. It contained a timer, a receiver, and a short-range transmitter designed to flood the bunker with interference when activated. "A jammer," Ethan said. "Someone installed it before this place was abandoned, or returned later." The timer showed 17 minutes remaining. Ethan disconnected the trigger circuit and sealed the device inside a metal storage box. Atlas returned to Harper and lowered himself beside her, accepting Rachel's trembling hand against his neck for only a moment. Rachel resumed searching the files and found a group of coordinates hidden inside Ryan's vessel diagrams. The location lay more than 60 miles offshore, beyond the normal commercial shipping lanes. Satellite images stored with the record showed a converted oceanographic platform registered to a North Star shell company. Technical notes identified Ryan as a retained systems engineer assigned to repair the platform's remote weapons control network. Rachel stared at the screen. "He is there." Harper examined the coordinates. "If these records are current, yes." Daniel reminded her that their priority was transmitting the evidence before North Star could destroy it. Harper understood, but her expression had changed. Ryan had risked his life to help her escape and had built the protection inside Atlas's collar. Publishing the files might bring down North Star, but it would not save him if the company abandoned or executed its prisoners once exposed. "We send the evidence," Harper said. "Then we go after Ryan." Daniel studied her for a long moment. Outside, the Pacific thundered beneath the cliffs. Inside the bunker, Ethan secured the first data partition. Rachel held the coordinates of her missing brother, and Atlas rested beneath the collar that had carried North Star's secrets through the storm. Daniel looked toward the sealed entrance. "Then we make sure the truth survives long enough to lead us to him." The first warning came from the lighthouse above them. 3 heavy impacts traveled through the concrete ceiling, followed by the sharp crack of breaking glass. Black Harbor had reached Cape Flattery. Ethan Cole looked at the satellite terminal as the transmission bar crawled across his screen. The first data partition was being sent simultaneously to 4 investigative newspapers, an independent evidence archive, and Assistant United States Attorney Evelyn Grant. Evelyn was 49, tall and composed, with dark brown skin, silver threaded through her tightly curled hair, and the patient expression of someone who had spent 20 years watching powerful men lie under oath. She had prosecuted military procurement fraud and survived 2 attempts to remove her from office. Ryan had identified her in his private files as one of the few federal officials North Star had failed to purchase. 8 minutes, Ethan said. "That is assuming the satellite remains stable and no one turns this bunker into gravel." Daniel cross-checked the magazine in his sidearm and moved toward the reinforced entrance. Megan Foster pulled Harper's cot behind the old generator housing, while Rachel Monroe remained beside Ethan with Ryan's copied documents open across a second laptop. Atlas stood between Harper and the stairs. His bandaged shoulder trembled, but his attention was fixed on the steel door. A voice came through Daniel's secure radio. It belonged to Rear Admiral Laura Bennett. "Commander Cross, armed federal personnel are approaching your position. Stand down and surrender the civilian witnesses." Daniel looked at the signal authentication. The code was valid. "Admiral, identify the agency." "That information is restricted." "Then I am not opening the door." Bennett's breathing tightened. "Daniel, you are placing Coast Guard personnel in danger." Before he could answer, another voice broke across the frequency. "Commander, don't listen to the order." It was Caleb Dunn. Static tore through his words, but the young seaman continued. "The evacuation team at the station carried Black Harbor badges under their federal jackets. They ordered me to identify your route. I gave them the wrong road, but they found the lighthouse anyway. "Where are you?" Daniel asked. "In the old service tunnel below the North Cliff." A metallic crash sounded through Caleb's transmission. "And I'm not alone." The bunker lights flickered. Ethan glanced toward the power monitor. "They found the external junction." Rachel opened the publishing interface connected to the newspapers. "Can we release part of the evidence now?" Harper shook her head. "If the files appear without authentication, North Star will call them fabricated." "Then we authenticate them publicly," Rachel said. She activated a live emergency broadcast through the Sentinel's independent streaming account. Her face appeared on screen, pale beneath the harsh bunker lights. "My name is Rachel Monroe. I am an investigative reporter in Washington State. The documents being transmitted tonight show that North Star Dynamics used civilian ships, military contractors, and corrupted government officials to conduct illegal surveillance and targeted killings. Copies are being sent to multiple news organizations and federal authorities. If this broadcast stops, assume someone has tried to prevent the evidence from being released." The viewer count began climbing as the feed was mirrored by other accounts. North Star could still attack the bunker, but it could no longer make everyone inside disappear quietly. The steel entrance shook beneath an explosive charge. Dust fell from the ceiling. Atlas growled and shifted closer to Harper. Daniel took position behind a concrete support column. The door bent inward but held. A second charge struck the locking wheel. At the same moment, the emergency hatch near the generator opened from the outside. Caleb crawled through first, his uniform torn at one shoulder and blood running from a cut above his eyebrow. He carried a Coast Guard carbine and dragged an unconscious Black Harbor operator by the collar. Caleb's open, anxious face had changed. Fear was still present, but it no longer controlled him. "He tried to arrest me under an order signed by someone who retired last year," Caleb said. "I decided the paperwork was suspicious." Daniel helped pull him inside. "You disobeyed regional command?" "Yes, sir." "Good." The main entrance burst open. Two Black Harbor operators entered through smoke, wearing dark tactical equipment without insignia. Daniel fired into the concrete near the first man's feet, forcing him behind the doorframe. Caleb covered the opposite angle. Neither man wanted a gunfight. Their objective was the collar and the computers. One operator threw a compact device into the room. It was shaped like a black cylinder with a blinking red strip. Ethan saw it first. "Data killer!" The device struck the floor, rolled past Daniel, and headed directly toward the satellite terminal. Atlas moved before anyone else. The old German shepherd launched himself across the bunker, struck the cylinder with his chest, and drove it beneath the dead generator housing. The explosion was small, but violent. White light filled the room. The pressure wave knocked Ethan against the table and threw Atlas onto his injured side. The satellite terminal remained upright, but the bunker's primary power failed. Only the battery pack kept the transmission alive. "Atlas!" Harper tried to rise from the cot, but pain folded her back. Megan reached the dog first. Atlas lay motionless beside the generator, blood spreading through the fur near his shoulder. Megan opened her field medical kit and checked his breathing. "He's alive." She cut away the damaged bandage and found a deep fragment wound below the old scar. Atlas's pulse was weak and rapid. Megan pressed gauze into the injury, started an emergency fluid line, and covered his body with a thermal blanket. "Stay with me, old soldier," she whispered. "You did your part. Let us do ours." A figure entered through the damaged doorway behind the operators. Harper recognized Grant Voss immediately. Her former handler was older now, perhaps 53, but still broad and physically controlled, with close-cropped gray hair and pale eyes that never showed surprise. A burn scar marked the side of his neck, and he carried himself with the rigid confidence of a man who believed obedience was a natural law. Voss had once treated Atlas as equipment and Harper as a weapon. Now he looked at both of them with disappointment rather than hatred. "You could have come home," he told Harper. North Star would have corrected this. Harper's hand found the pistol Daniel had placed beside the cot. She raised it before anyone could stop her. Voss stepped forward, certain she would hesitate. "You know what I taught you," he said. "Finish the threat." For several seconds, Harper saw every dead witness, every false accident, and every year spent running. Killing Voss would have been easy. North Star had trained that ease into her. Her finger rested on the trigger. Then Atlas made a weak sound behind Megan, and Harper looked toward him. The dog had chosen her when every human system around them demanded obedience. Ryan had told her that evidence could save the living. Daniel had shown her that guilt did not have to become another weapon. Harper lowered the pistol. "No," she said. "You taught me how to kill a threat. Ryan taught me how to expose one." Daniel struck Voss's weapon aside. Caleb forced him to the floor and secured his wrists. Harper watched without satisfaction.
Voss would not become another secret body. He would become a witness in a courtroom. 2 minutes, Ethan said. His forehead was bleeding, but his hands continued working across the keyboard. Outside, another Black Harbor team cut the lighthouse power completely. The bunker went dark, except for battery lamps and the glow of the laptops. The satellite connection weakened. Rachel held the antenna control steady while continuing the live broadcast. Gunfire struck the outer concrete. Daniel and Caleb prevented the remaining operators from entering, forcing them back through the ruined doorway. 30 seconds, Ethan called. The transmission froze at 97%. Rachel adjusted the emergency dish manually using Ryan's calibration notes. "Come on," she whispered. "You built this route. Help me finish it." The signal returned. 98%. 99. Every light died. For one terrible second, the laptops remained black. Then the backup battery activated, and a single message appeared on Ethan's screen. Transfer complete. Multiple verified recipients. Rachel's broadcast had already been copied by thousands of viewers. Evelyn Grant confirmed receipt through a secured text line. The evidence could no longer be erased from one building, one computer, or one dog's collar. A second file opened automatically. It contained a weak emergency transmission from the offshore coordinates Rachel had discovered. Static filled the bunker speakers. Then Ryan Monroe's voice emerged, exhausted but alive. "Rachel, if you can hear this, the weapons platform is preparing to move. They know the files are gone. We have less than 12 hours. Rachel pressed both hands against the table. Harper looked from the coordinates to Atlas, who was still breathing beneath Megan's blood-stained hands. Daniel stared toward the dark Pacific beyond the bunker walls. The truth had escaped North Star. But Ryan was still waiting offshore. Ryan Monroe's emergency transmission changed everything. Within minutes of receiving it, Assistant United States Attorney Evelyn Grant secured federal warrants connected to the evidence Ethan had transmitted. The files were duplicated across newsrooms, federal archives, and independent servers before North Star Dynamics could erase them. By sunrise,
National networks were reporting that the defense contractor had operated illegal surveillance programs, manipulated civilian vessels, bribed government officials, and arranged deaths to look like accidents. Federal agents entered North Star offices in Tacoma, Colorado Springs, and Washington, D.C. Executives who had spent years hiding behind security clearances were arrested before they could destroy their records. Several officials attempted to resign, but Evelyn had already frozen their accounts and restricted their travel. North Star's carefully protected empire began collapsing in public. At Cape Flattery, Megan Foster worked through the final hours of darkness to keep Atlas alive. The explosion had driven metal fragments into the old German shepherd's shoulder, close to the scar from his earlier service. His breathing remained steady, but blood loss and exhaustion left him dangerously weak. Harper sat beside him on the bunker floor, one hand resting against his neck, while Megan cleaned the wound and closed it with field sutures. Harper had survived North Star, the Pacific, and Black Harbor. But watching Atlas struggle frightened her more than any armed man ever had. "He saved the transmission," Rachel said quietly. Harper looked at the dog's gray muzzle. "He has been saving people his entire life." Ryan's message warned that the offshore platform would move within 12 hours. Daniel contacted Rear Admiral Laura Bennett again, this time attaching verified copies of the North Star files and the emergency coordinates. Bennett remained silent for nearly a minute. She had ordered Daniel to surrender Harper because she believed she was following legitimate instructions. Now she saw that officials above her had used her authority to assist Black Harbor. "You were right not to trust the order," she said. Daniel did not celebrate. "I need aircraft, a boarding team, and medical support." Bennett answered immediately. "You will have them." Daniel left Harper, Megan, Ethan, and Atlas at a secure medical facility under federal protection. Rachel insisted on joining the rescue flight, but Daniel refused to place her inside the assault team. Instead, she traveled aboard the medical helicopter that would follow once the platform was secured. Caleb Dunn joined Daniel despite his injuries. The young seaman's face was bruised and his uniform torn, but the uncertainty that once followed him had disappeared. He had chosen loyalty to people over obedience to corrupted orders, and Daniel trusted him because of that choice. The offshore facility appeared shortly after dawn, rising from the gray Pacific like an abandoned research station. It had once been an oceanographic platform, but North Star had rebuilt its interior around remote control systems capable of seizing commercial ships and directing weaponized drones. 2 patrol boats attempted to block the Coast Guard approach, but federal authorities had already suspended North Star's maritime licenses. When the operators realized the evidence was public and arrest warrants had been issued, most surrendered rather than die protecting a company whose leaders were already in custody. Daniel led the boarding team through the lower engineering deck. They found Ryan locked inside a control room surrounded by dismantled guidance units and exposed wiring. 3 months of captivity had changed him. He was thinner. His dark blonde hair had grown past his ears, and a healing cut crossed his cheek. His wrists carried bruises from restraints, but his blue eyes still held the intelligence and quiet humor Rachel remembered. North Star had kept him alive because only he could repair the vessel control system Harper had sabotaged during her escape. Ryan looked at Daniel's uniform and then at the armed team behind him. "Are you actually Coast Guard?" Daniel almost smiled. "Today, yes." "Rachel?" "She's waiting." Ryan's knees weakened before he reached the door. Daniel caught him and helped him toward the upper deck. The medical helicopter landed once the platform was secure. Rachel jumped out before the crew could fully lower the steps. For a moment, she and Ryan simply stared at each other across the wet deck. Rachel had imagined this reunion during countless sleepless nights, but every imagined version had ended with a body or a grave. Ryan opened his arms. She ran to him. Rachel struck his chest once before pulling him close.
"You were alive." "I tried to tell you." "You hid the message in an engine noise file." "I was under pressure." She laughed and cried against his shoulder while Daniel turned away to give them privacy. Around them, federal agents collected computers, detained North Star personnel, and secured the weapons systems. For Rachel and Ryan, the platform disappeared. After 3 months of uncertainty, they were brother and sister again. The investigations continued for weeks. Grant Voss agreed to testify after learning that North Star's executives planned to blame Black Harbor for every illegal operation. His evidence connected senior officials to the killings and confirmed that the Kodiak disaster had been deliberately created to eliminate a maritime inspector. Mark Ellis had died entering a rescue North Star had sabotaged, not because Daniel had made a reckless decision. The Coast Guard formally cleared Daniel of any responsibility. Mark's widow received the corrected report, and Daniel visited her personally. The truth did not bring Mark home, but it finally removed the lie Daniel had carried for 6 years. Harper became the central protected witness in the federal case. Prosecutors reviewed the missions she had supported and recognized that North Star had recruited her while she was young, manipulated her grief, controlled her movements, and threatened her whenever she questioned orders. Evelyn Grant negotiated immunity for actions Harper had performed under coercion in exchange for complete testimony against North Star's leadership. Harper did not call it forgiveness. She understood that some guilt would remain with her. But for the first time, she was allowed to use the truth instead of violence to protect others. Rachel's investigation became the largest story ever published by the Seattle Sentinel. Martin Hale devoted the front page and the paper's entire digital edition to it. Rachel titled the series The Black Harbor Files, but the first paragraph did not mention North Star, government corruption, or secret weapons. It thanked Atlas, the wounded German shepherd who had carried the evidence through a storm when every human system around him had failed. Atlas recovered slowly. When Megan finally removed the tactical collar, Harper held his head between her hands. The heavy black equipment had marked his fur and skin after years of service. Inside, it had been evidence, access codes, and the burden of keeping people alive. Megan placed the collar inside a federal evidence case. Harper looked into Atlas's tired brown eyes. "You don't have to carry anything for them again." Months later, Harper moved into a small cedar house near the Washington coast. The property had a fenced yard, a view of the water, and enough space for retired working dogs that had nowhere else to go. Megan helped her establish a recovery program for military and rescue dogs with old injuries. Ryan visited while rebuilding his health. Rachel arrived on weekends with newspapers, coffee, and stories about officials who had finally learned that classified did not mean untouchable. Daniel sometimes stood at the edge of the yard watching the ocean, without seeing Mark's death in every wave. On a warm afternoon, Atlas lay asleep in a patch of sunlight on Harper's porch. His scarred shoulder rested against the wooden boards, and his damaged ear moved gently in the sea breeze. No tactical collar circled his neck. No hidden device pressed against his body. No door required guarding. Harper sat beside him and placed her hand in his fur. Atlas opened one eye, saw that she was safe, and closed it again. For the first time in his long life, the old German shepherd carried nothing but his name. Harper and Atlas survived because neither of them chose to let go. When every human system failed them,
God placed a faithful German shepherd beside a broken woman and gave them enough strength to carry the truth through the storm. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of their journey. God does not always calm the ocean immediately. Sometimes, He sends someone to remain beside us until we reach the shore. What do you think saved Harper most? Her courage, Atlas's loyalty, or God's plan working through them both? And have you ever had a person or an animal stay beside you during the darkest moment of your life? Share your story in the comments. Your words may bring hope to someone who feels completely alone today. If this story touched your heart, please give the video a like, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to Warm Light Tales. Turn on notifications so you will not miss our next powerful story of courage, loyalty, faith, and redemption. May God protect you, guide you through every storm, and remind you that even after the darkest night, the light will always return.